Hi, welcome back to Have You Heard, the social media podcast by us here at The Social Shepherd. My name is Zoe. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO here, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. Fergus, do you want to introduce yourself very quickly?
Yeah, my name's Fergus Dyer-Smith. I'm the founder CEO of a company called Wooshii.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And this is a little bit of a new thing for us. We've never done a virtual podcast and we've never had guests on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Right, hope the wheels don't fall off. The first
Yeah,
one.
yeah, me too, me too. We've had a bit of a rocky start with our internet, but we're getting there. Cool. Okay, so I just wanted to kick off for the listeners. Could you just describe in no more than 2 sentences what you do?
What I do or what our company does?
What you do, and then we can do what the company does.
Okay. Well, the majority of my time is spent leading a company called Wooshii, but in particular, I'm predominantly focused on building products, specifically in the AI space for agency and marketing teams. So our business is two sides. We have an agency side and then we have a product side. And I predominantly focus on helping deliver and take those products into market and into customers.
Nice, fabulous. And then can you give us a little bit of an oversight on Wooshii exactly? So what do you do and how do you do it?
Yeah, well, Wooshie's gone through different phases, I'd say. So it's essentially a content business. It was established as a content business, runs content production for global enterprise around the world and agencies. That's the core of it. And then on the other side of it is we also have a fairly heavy technology play. So we have a number of products. One works in content analysis, uses AI to analyze content within social, and then the other is a more of a platform on which agencies can become way more productive. Again, another AI-based platform, which is used from everyone across Publicis Pro to you name it, a whole bunch of the people that use it.
Okay, nice. And you mentioned that you're using AI to analyze content. Is that correct? So
Yes,
how,
we are.
because that's something, and you're probably ahead of the game compared to most agencies, which is why agencies are using you guys. But how exactly are you doing that and what kind of, just how does that work basically? I'm not going
Well,
to
we do a
pretend to be
very
an expert in
specific,
AI. I'm not.
yeah, we do a very specific thing. We are, the adage, which is, half of my marketing spend is wasted if only I knew which half. We're essentially trying to show companies which half is being wasted. Predominantly, the analysis we do is around video. So we look at video that is placed on any of the big sort of video platforms: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Snapchat, etc. And what our product can show you is how many people are actually seeing or hearing the things that you care about. So it could be that you've got some branding in your video. It could be that you've got someone performing an action. It could be you got somebody saying something or using a tool or all sorts of, there are different things that brands care about inside the ads that the problem is that they don't know, how many people actually got to those things and actually consumed that. So you might know how many people started the ad, but you don't know how many people finally saw you holding up a Pixel 9 at the end, which perhaps is the key thing that you care about. And so what we're able to do for a customer is say, okay, well, we can tell you exactly how many people got to that point in the video and saw or heard the thing that you care about. And then we can do it scale across all your ads and sort of show you how effective your creative is actually being. So it's a different way of thinking about video ads because we are looking at the content itself. We use platform metrics to inform what we do, but it's all about the ad itself, not everything that goes around it, like views and click-through rates and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, because that was going to be my sort of next question. Like, how does, obviously, we would analyze view through rates and completion rates in platform. What's kind of like the difference that you guys can add on to that?
Well, the thing about a view through rate is all that does is it tells you how many people are watching at any given point in time, but it tells you nothing about but what's going on? So the video you could have a blank screen that runs for 30 seconds and you'll still get a view through rate, right?
Yeah.
What we can tell you is, okay, and also view through rate is sort of a linear thing. It runs linearly, and that's not how views work on videos. They tend to drop off quite sharply, and then you have a long tail to varying degrees. It's not the same. Sometimes they drop off a cliff. Sometimes it's more gradual. So that's part one.
Okay.
Part two is you then really want to know, we all know that it's a decay. So we all know that views drop off over time, but how many, the the things I care about are in this particular ad, how many people are actually getting to that particular point in time. So
Yeah.
view through rate just tells you, oh, over the course of the video, this is how many people are dropping off every second. What we can
Hmm.
say is, no, we'll literally tell you how many people got to, I don't know, like I said, someone holding up a Pixel 9 or someone playing football or someone saying the word, download Google Chrome. Like these are the things that we can find at scale, map it to how many people are watching at any point in time and tell you, okay, there you go. That's how many people are watching.
Nice, nice. And I guess, were you predominantly focused on the paid side of things whenever it comes to video creative, or do you do much in the organic space?
Well, I mean, the company as a whole works across the whole thing, but in terms of brand check itself, it's sort of focused on paid creator, influencer to a degree if it's being promoted, but it can work within organic. The mechanism and the machinery works within organic. You just have an additional problem with organic, which is that the organic influencer has to provide you with the data. So there's a certain level of data that you need for this to work. But that's slowly changing as brands, they run sort of like partner ads or, that sort of starts to change things. And as soon as a brand puts money behind an asset, then we can capture the curves that we need.
Nice, nice. And am I right in thinking, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you guys have a production side of the business as well?
Yeah, so the content business really is predominantly a production business. That's where it's formed. It started off life as like a two-sided marketplace for production. If you needed a team in, I don't know, Australia to go and film something in Sydney, then you could come on our platform, find a vendor, and we'd match you with the right people. This is years ago, so almost like before Fiverr and people like that. And then over time, it built up much larger sort of customers, and they needed a lot more service, so it became more agency-like. And we still use that mechanism today. Still use those teams and the network and the platform and all the rest of it. But yeah, predominantly it's a production business essentially.
Okay, so I guess do you have a production team, or you're mostly working with
Yeah,
external
so no,
partners?
we don't
Okay.
make anything ourselves. We're a production company that doesn't make anything. We use all these other suppliers. We act as with the project managers. I mean, we call them producers, but essentially they're project managers that sort of run productions. But we don't have cameras. We do run post production, but that's a sort of niche part of what we do. But it's essentially a model that means that from a customer's point of view, the problem you're solving is, okay, how can I, if I'm a global enterprise and I consequently need things shooting all over the world, how do I do that without having to local teams and get local offices and all that sort of stuff? And so we come in and just say, look, we can run it globally wherever you are. You don't have to worry about that piece. But yeah, we're not out running around with cameras and microphones.
Okay, nice. So are you sort of vetting creators and local people to make sure they can deliver to the
Yeah,
standard, the people that are
yeah,
working?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So
nice.
I mean, the company itself, from a customer's point of view, like, they don't really interface with our network. They just interface with us. So if we go out and find a supplier and they're not up to scratch, the customer will never know because we just we rip them out and put in a new group.
Hmm.
We've got better at that over the years, so we sort of know now who's going to work out and who's not. And obviously, we've got a lot of trusted suppliers that we built up. But yeah, from a customer's point of view, it makes really that we are the one throat to choke sort of thing.
Nice. Probably makes their life a lot easier.
I hope
And do you
so.
guys handle the creative ideation as well? So do you come up with the concepts for ads, for example?
We can do. It's a bit of a mix. So sometimes that's what the customer wants.
Hmm.
But a lot of the stuff we make is sort of boring. In a way, it's sort of like we've got our clients are people like biotech companies, and we do a lot with Amazon and chemical companies and just all this sort of stuff. And so creative in inverted commas it's used in some cases, but a lot of the time it's just, look, we need to get a shot of the CEO walking into this building and then capturing him giving a talk. It's that type of thing.
So I guess, because I don't know if you heard about it, but the huge update with Meta, where they're going to be taking away manual campaigns and creative is going to be your new targeting. That's probably music to your ears for the industry that you're in, because there's just going to be so much hunger for creative. And I think it's going to have such a big impact on, because are you working day to day with the paid media managers or the paid social managers of the clients that you're working with?
It can be. So, I mean, and that's where, brand checkers come into things, because obviously we do a lot more of that now. And actually, to your point, I mean, if you think about it, really, TikTok already is what you're describing. So what Meta are describing is actually what TikTok is, because TikTok, the way that platform works is somewhat unique to the others, in that you don't have to have a following to produce huge results,
Mhm.
because it's all about the content. So you don't really follow people on. I mean, people do follow people, but that's not where the value is. The value lies in the quality of the content, and I think Meta are going that direction. Their algorithms, frankly, got so good now at targeting that the idea of having someone's hands on the levers is a little bit old hat now,
Mhm.
and it really does come down to the creative, and that's where brand check was born. Was this idea that, okay, the last piece of all of this is understanding we've got it in front of the right audience, we've maximized this, we've got the spend as low as we possibly can. Now, is actually anyone seeing or hearing the thing that we're putting in front of them? That was sort of, for us, the bit that needed answering still.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think obviously we have a full paid media arm to our business here, and we're kind of having to prep that team to be like, your jobs and you, as you know it, are not going to be here in a couple of years' time. And the skills that you've developed, like, yes, they are necessary for you to be able to put together an informed strategy, but actually, really, your creative skill set and your ability to bring a brief together with the support of AI as well is going to be the important thing moving forward, which sometimes doesn't actually come naturally to paid media people because they're so in the data and they love the doing of the job. So it's quite an interesting one. But I am intrigued, and I'm sure you've seen it. Obviously, with ChatGPT image generator now and all of the paid ads that are now coming off the back of that, particularly from a still perspective, moving stuff isn't quite there yet. But how do you kind of see your business evolving with that in mind?
I mean, production's about to change dramatically. It's a question of time, really, more than anything. Moving images pretty hard. It's probably a harder problem to solve than, it's sort of going up, isn't it? Started with copywriting. That's sort of somewhat been hammered. Then you get into image generation, which is just, yeah, you're right, the recent release. But even before that, we had things like some of these models like Flux had just got really, really good. And ultimately that will seep into motion. The thing still remains, though, which is, and I do wonder about this, is once, so there's a couple of thoughts on it. The first is, once you can create any content at, let's say, close to zero, I mean, it won't be completely zero, but let's say any content, you just then get such huge volumes. It becomes a question, okay, yeah, but where do I put my money? So what do I put my money behind? So the bottleneck is no longer, we need to make sure we get exactly the right ad and therefore do all this pre-testing and all the rest of it. It's like, well, no, because we can produce like 1,000 ads in 20 minutes. Let's just produce them. But then you still have to make some decisions around which horse you're going to back. And I think that's where part of that may come from a human element, and part of it may come from data and running things and just seeing what happens live. So that's one thought. I think the other one that is, you hear a lot about is the opportunity within personalization and sort of, and I have nothing to base this on other than my own gut instinct, which is I'm not sure that that's necessarily where everyone wants to be. Advertising in the 80s was sort of the heyday of advertising. It was like TV advertising anyway. It was all about creating these sort of aspirational worlds. People bought into brands. I put a post up actually the other day, which was a video that I'd made 10 years ago or something, where I just took 63 ads or something from the 80s and cut them together in a 60-second slot. So there's like 1 second from each to see how many ads people could recognize. And most people who lived through that era or the 90s can pick out at least 75% of them, even from a second. And you just think, how many ads from the last 10 years could you do that with? I'm
No,
not sure any.
none.
So,
Like we're
no,
so like spoiled, and I think like I've been rewatching Mad Men as well, which
right.
like for my third
Yeah,
time
like,
watching it, I'm obsessed. But it was like the world has just changed so much since then. And it was back then, you would go into a cafe and someone might say, "Oh, what do you do?" And you might go, "I work in advertising." "Oh, I made the Sprite commercial." Everyone's gonna know what that is. Whereas nowadays, we're so saturated with what we're seeing that very few brands are actually having those standout moments where you remember what they're doing.
yeah, no, absolutely. And it's, and I just wonder whether that might flip round again, especially as you start to see some of the, the the platforms such as Netflix and Apple start to introduce ads back in. So you're almost going full circle back to an interruptive world, and then you have the opportunity to present ideas and, like I said, characters that people aspire to be like. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how that plans out. It could. I mean, I look at my kids and they don't even watch those platforms. They're just all they watch is really YouTube and
Yeah.
TikTok. So it's like,
Yeah, no, I get it. And I think as well, the big thing for AI, obviously we've got the still stuff. You can bash out a whole load of stills, like we've talked about. Video is a bit more tricky. Where it gets really interesting, particularly from a paid perspective, is you've probably seen that you can generate your AI creators on TikTok and stuff like that. Now, and they actually do look pretty real, to be entirely honest. But it's at what point with AI do humans become trusting of AI creators? Like, and is that, do you have any thoughts on whether that is actually going to happen? I thought about it the other day and I was a bit like, will we see industries like fast fashion, for example, adopt, AI models, AI creative and stuff because it might be cheaper and more cost efficient? And then potentially some of the more luxury brands that have bigger budgets per piece of content that they create, they'll stick to a more human approach. And the more human approach will be seen as like the luxury approach.
I
Like
mean, they
what?
already are. So I mean, I think it was last week. I think H&M
Mm,
announced that they're going to use AI versions of their models. So that, from what I can remember, I think what they've essentially agreed is, if we, can we take an AI likeness of you as a model, and you'll get a cut of every time we use you. Blah 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 blah. That seems inevitable. I think there's a couple of interesting things though. So trusting in an AI is but you look at things like character AI, which just blew up, and how many people were building out, these entities that they're engaging with. It's like, who knows? It's like what feels like a weird behavior now could feel totally normal in 10 years' time. That's often what happens. You know, I heard Rory Sutherland recently talking about how, the first time he ever used a mobile phone, which was the, great big bricks, and just getting abuse because everyone just thought you were a total dick if you had one of these, walking around with one. So that's, attitudes change. One thing that I think is going to be really interesting is, and I wonder whether there's a company out there doing this right now, which is sort of rights management. So if I'm Taylor Swift or whatever, could I sell my likeness and my voice to an AI, to a company that specializes in AI rights management? So you can come along now as an ad creator and say, look, I want to use Taylor Swift. And they're like, well, okay, that's $10 million. And you're like, I can't quite afford that. And they said, you can take for $1 million, you can have the AI version. And you're like, all right, yeah, I'll do that. So I wonder whether that's something that's going to come along. There's going to be a company that's just going to go up, buy up the rights to
yeah.
people's likeness. And then we're just going to see them everywhere, which could
It's
devalue the whole thing, of course. But
it is a really interesting one. I think there was something that happened. I saw something on TikTok and someone had done that basically because it's not as regulated as it should be at the minute. And someone had basically, oh, but it was something to do, and you're probably not across this, to do with the Hailey Bieber, Selena Gomez situation. But someone
right.
had basically created this like AI scenario that wasn't real, and everyone in the comments knew that it wasn't real. But then, like, looking at it, I was like, that's actually really dangerous, the fact that people can do that. And there isn't that, like, there kind of is that level of regulation where the platforms will do their best to label something as AI generated, but they don't always get it right. So at what point are we gonna?
I don't know whether it's even on the platforms. I wonder whether that's our own society's just going to have to come. If you think about, we've been able to fake things for years. It was like, initially it was like faking photography, and then you got Photoshop, and then you got airbrushing models and all this sort of stuff. Over time, what happens is people educate themselves with the fact that they can say, look, I'm not sure that's real. I think that's been
Yeah.
airbrushed or whatever. And I just wonder whether people are going to have a more sadly, a more skeptical view on what they're seeing, and just thinking, is there some chance that this has been I'm not sure that, like, the platforms themselves, and maybe they'll do their best job to sort of say, yeah, this is AI generated. I mean, not easy, but first of all, I think if you produce something that is using AI, then you should, if it's not nefarious, you just say it is. It's like most people accept it if you just say, yeah, this is an AI version of X, Y, and Z. All right, you've told me, let's get on with it, sort of thing. If it's a bad actor, then there are probably some technological solutions that can help understand whether this is
Mm.
AI generated or not. But then it's just your own common sense to a certain degree
Yeah,
trying to
I
make
guess you're
sense of it, isn't
probably
it?
right, to be fair. And because I guess, say someone used AI to generate something that was fake news or false. It's the same as it is nowadays as someone writing a tweet that's fake news or false. You have to use your
Or
own.
writing an entire fake story. You just need, it's incumbent on us now to just be a lot more thoughtful around what we're seeing and what we're hearing, and just sort of trying to make, okay, does this make sense? Does it add up? I don't know. I mean, I don't have the answer. Like this,
No, I
my
wish we
playground.
all had the answers. We're
Yeah.
all trying to figure it out. I guess, are there any roles within your business? We had a company strategy day probably like 4 weeks ago now, and we're very honest with our team and like, we'll support you, we'll get you the training, we'll get there together. But, there are going to be some roles that won't exist in a couple of years' time, and we'll move you all into different roles. And like, we're very protective of our team and everything, but it's an honest conversation that needs to be had. Obviously, AI is so integrated into your business, given what you do. Have you had to have any conversations like that with any of your team, or are there any roles in your business that you think are going to completely change?
Well, I've had a few instances. So we got quite early access to before ChatGPT. We had access to sort of 2.5, I think. So this is before ChatGPT came out. So we when we saw that, we were like, holy smokes, this is going to change everything. So we started our response was to start building solutions to serve our industry. So that was one way we came at it, was to say, okay, let's build the tools that will put us out of business, essentially. We've had a few instances where we've had certain roles where people have left the business for one reason or another. And none of them not forced out. They've just gone to a different role or gone off to do something different or whatever it happens to be. And we now sort of sit there and go, do we need to replace that role, or can we use this technology that we've built or rented to replace it? And so many times now the answer's been, yeah, we can just plug this thing in now and keep going, and it makes no difference. So the reality is, and obviously my company, because I talk about AI constantly, my company know that I lean into it heavily. But there are, and so what I'm actively doing with them is encouraging them to use it in every place that they can find a way to do it, to improve their productivity. Production is an interesting one, especially with video, because we're some way yet from being able to fly someone to a very specific place to get a specific shot. Those sorts of things you're going to take some time before you can just prompt to get exactly the thing that you need. Interviews like this, like that's not, you could get pretty boring pretty quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think we've ever sat everyone down and said, right, your role. One thing I do say, but I say this to everybody, is that the way to think about this, I think, is to think more in terms of tasks than jobs. So if you think about AI as being a great task replacer, which it is, then you think about how many tasks, what is, how many tasks is my job? And if your job is one task, like copywriting, then you're probably in the danger zone, But if you cover many things, then it's much more difficult to rip you out.
Yeah, like that's what we've said as well, is trying to train everyone to be more of like a T-shaped marketer as such. And I know that's such a wanky term to use, but it's
I
true.
like it.
You do need to like have your specialism that you're really good at, but know how to apply that and ideate. Like just being a copywriter, like you said, isn't good enough these days. It's knowing, how does copy impact on organic? How does it impact on paid? What does influencer copy need to look at? Like the breadth in it. Because I don't know, and you may disagree with this, but I think AI will replace a lot of the doing for us, but there will need to be an element of like human strategy and human prompt, because if everyone just does the bare minimum on AI, I kind of compare it to best practice. If everyone follows the same best practice, then no one's coming out on top. So someone still has to be there to make the best operational and strategic decisions with AI in mind, to make sure that you're doing better than your competitors, basically. So I think there still is a need for humans, but the need is going to reduce, and you're going to need the best of the best humans, that are the best strategic thinkers, that aren't necessarily reliant on the doing as the day-to-day part of their roles.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. I think it's similarly. I sort of say, look, AI is doesn't do taste very well.
Mm.
It's never going to come up. I don't think it's ever going to come up with, like, I don't know, the next fashion thing, because that's not what fashion is about. Like, it's often completely illogical. And you're like, how on earth has that taken off? And that's a taste thing. It's brilliant once it knows what that is. It can sort of take that and produce, a million other versions of the same thing. But getting there in the first place is quite hard. Knowing what good looks like is another quite a human thing, like sort of being able to look at your two strategies and go, like, you might be able to, quantitatively look at one and say this is better, but there's a qualitative element often, especially in advertising. So I think you're right there. I think people still like to deal with humans. You may go and build a brilliant strategy using AI for a client, but they're kind of like sitting in a room and chatting it through with somebody. And, people are also inherently lazy. Even though I can get all these AIs to do certain things for me, do you know what? I just need you to go and use the AI to go and do something for me. Like, you just, if everyone's productivity goes up, if the whole, all the boats are going to be lifted, then you still got the same number of boats. We're just doing, that's a terrible analogy, but we're still doing we're just all doing 10 times as much. And your point around strategy as well, I say the same thing about creative, is like everyone wants like the magic map for creative. Like, what is the formula? And we're going to use AI, I'm going to analyze all these ads, and it's going to come with a pathway to producing the most creative ad. And you're like, that, the moment you have the map, by default, everything is no longer creative if everyone just uses that map. So there is an element of that, I think.
Yeah, for sure. One other thing I wanted to ask you was, so you're dealing with clients on a day-to-day basis, and presumably they come to you guys and decide if they want to work with you or not. Do you ever come across companies that are really AI adverse, and they're almost like, because we say it with clients, they're either like, we want everything, like you guys need to lead us through this, or they're like, no, we're scared, don't use anything, you can't use anything to do with AI to come up with ideas here. Like, where does it kind of sit with you guys?
So we have had we have had customers that have been told they can't use AI. So you get customers that, company policy is that we can't use anything unapproved and that sort of thing, and you can see that they're really frustrated by that, and that winds them up terribly. Mostly the customers, because of the nature of the product we're selling them, are quite leaned into it. So actually they've woken up and sort of said, we want to use it. I do think there might be an opportunity there, though. I think that, there's always an opportunity to do the opposite, which is for someone to come on and say, we never use AI. We only ever use humans. We're a craft shop, a bit like a sort of, I don't know, a cabinet maker versus an IKEA. It's like that is an angle that someone might take. But I don't think now I've got anyone who's completely adverse to it. If the worst we get would be someone that is using it and is a bit grumpy that they've had to use it.
Have you seen, just in the industry landscape, obviously we're leaning into AI as an agency. I think you kind of have to. I think the agencies that don't probably won't exist in 2 to 3 years' time, or will be severely struggling. I have seen a few independent agencies kind of go, we're not doing anything with AI, 100% human, and that's our USP. How do you think that's going to land?
Well, like I said, I think that's an opportunity. I think there's often opportunity in doing the opposite of what everyone else is doing, and so that does carve out for a small few the opportunity to do that. Sort of liken it, as I mentioned, that sort of liken it to pre-packed furniture versus a sort of handcrafted cabinet maker. So the likelihood is that you get very good quality work, but it's 10 times as expensive as what you can buy, that comes in a store, and there's not many of them, sort of, and they don't have a huge amount of business, and they're quite small, but they make a living, sort of thing. That's sort of where I think that will end up ultimately, because you're competing in a different space. So I don't think I don't think anyone today is now going to build a big business based on the fact they don't use any AI. But I think they could build a little small craft sort of shop that actually, a few people find value in, and they can make a pretty good living out of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess one thing that has been happening, and it's been going for a while, Meta have their own built-in AI tools where you can build creative. They're not particularly great. We've tested them. Do you see, they're obviously always going to try and make those better. Do you see any threat or worry to your business by platforms embedding more AI into their tools, or will you guys look to utilize that?
Not so much. I mean, most of the embedded ones we've used have also been pretty bad. So, Copilot in Microsoft and things like that. Ours is very we're working with a very specific group. So agencies have some very specific needs. So things like, you're dealing with multiple brands. How do you deal with the fact that you've got, I don't know, let's say you've got 10 clients, 10 completely different clients with completely different industries, completely different branding. Like that's one thinking. You have some very specific outputs that you need. And I'm not sure. Most of the times I've used those inbuilt versions. They haven't been very good, but that doesn't mean they can't get better. So let's assume that they do get great. You're sort of, when you're in Google Sheets, it sort of makes sense to use that tool within Google Sheets. So I guess that nobody knows is the honest answer. And I think a lot of it as well is these platforms using that as ways to train their own models. So obviously Meta is building out Llama, Microsoft building out their own models. They need input and understanding of how people are using those things. So it's probably partly that. But who knows how this will work its way through, because it's a bit like the early days of the internet. That's the way I feel.
Yeah, and we're probably going to get to a point, to be fair, where the playing field becomes a little bit more level with some of these tools. Because like, even internally, we're a Google Workspace business, so
Yeah,
technically we should be using Gemini as our AI note
yeah,
taker, but we don't because
yeah,
we have Granola, which is much better at taking notes. So at some point, you would like to hope that everything has like a bit more of a level playing field, and then you're just paying a premium for something that is smarter in a specific area.
yeah.
So that's kind of where we'll sort of look to go with that. Random question. What is your personal favorite social media platform and why?
Ooh, probably Twitter or X. But
Okay.
um, maybe I'm a bit old school, but I get so addicted to that thing. It's because I've also had to, I've cut myself off TikTok. I use TikTok just because I have to use it for work, but that thing's is a drug. So I stay off TikTok as much as I can. Instagram and Facebook tend to sort of, I'm a lurker. LinkedIn's probably my most out, like I push most material out on LinkedIn and engage on LinkedIn, but the one that I just can be on for hours is X, and it's mostly because I've got all the people there, a lot of technology people in there, AI people in there, founders are on there. I don't actually. I'm not a great producer on X. I just sit there consuming way too much.
Where on X?
Yeah.
Nice. And then what do you think, if you could give me one prediction that you think in 12 months' time, you're like, I'm 90% sure this is going to be true about how AI will impact social media, what would your prediction be?
What would my prediction be? I think I think all the platforms are going to go this Advantage Plus type system. So I think you're not going to have to mess about with levers. You'll just be able to give them audiences and they'll find your people. That feels like that's inevitable. And that might even happen within 6 months.
Mhm.
I think the other interesting piece that's coming, I think the measurement of the content itself is going to become way more important than actually what's going on in the platform, because I just think that's gonna happen regardless. I think they're the two. I do worry when I see things like Instagram talking about how they're going to make tools to help you use AI to make comments and stuff like that. I think, that is just, we are going to create AI slop, as they call it. That just feels dumb, but I don't know.
And that would also be something that would be really easy for the platforms to moderate as well. Like they would probably put a comment in that was like generated with AI type thing. And that naturally
Yeah.
in itself is going to cause
Yeah,
more
and then if you could
issues
just
with,
turn all
yeah.
those off, then that'd be great, because they're just like, what is the point? It's like, it's not common, is it? It's just like, it doesn't make any. I see it on LinkedIn. You see it already anyway. I mean, you see it on LinkedIn all the time. I get comments on all my stuff, and there's people on there that I know because we're sort of connecting and all the rest of it that are genuine. And then I see comments, and you just know that it's an AI comment. I mean, I'll respond to it, but sometimes, but you just think, what was the point in that? It's like,
Oh my goodness, what do you think of the M dash situation where everyone's hating on the M dash? Have you seen that?
no,
So everyone's saying that the M dash, which is slightly longer than most people would traditionally click on their keyboard, if you
yeah,
see that in a piece of copy that ChatGPT has made it basically because they love an M dash. So everyone's
is
like
that what it
hating.
is?
Yeah, yeah.
That's That's hilarious. I hadn't come across that. That makes total sense though, because it does do that all the time. Interesting. Yeah. Not that you need that, because you just read a comment and you go, that is so AI generated. It's like,
I have like a long list of keywords that I've put into ChatGPT that's like, don't use any of these words.
yeah. The
And
problem with
no,
that is, so they don't respond, just top tip, but they don't respond very well to telling them not to do, because they're predictive models. They don't respond very well to doing things that you tell them not to do. So the better way is to say, write it and then have a second prompt that says, go and see if any of these words are there. If they are, change them. You get a much better output.
interesting. Okay, okay.
Little
Thank
top
you.
tip there for everyone.
Thank you. Cool. Okay. Well, was there anything that you wanted to chat through today that we haven't covered already? Nice. Fabulous. All right. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me, Fergus. And thank you to everyone that has listened. If there's anything that you want us to cover or anyone that you would like to see in the podcast, please feel free to drop a comment.